Now, here I want to dive into the short life of Miss Tammy Terrell. Now, me personally, I was first introduced to Tammy Terrell when I watched the Temptations movie. That's one of my favorite bio documentaries slash movie slash fiction nonfiction stories. Now, she had a small role in it where it showed her with David Ruffin, but that's how I was first introduced to her name. So I didn't know that there was a whole story behind her. I didn't even know she was an actual artist on Motown. So I was really surprised when I started seeing stuff popping up about her. And I went down a rabbit hole, and this woman's life story was so sad and so short lived. She literally, in that small amount of time that she lived, suffered so much. Like at the age of 11, she was raped by three boys. After that, I know, she was born Thomasina Winifred Montgomery, actually, but she changed her name to Tammy later. They did call her Tommy originally, but she changed her name to Tammy. I know when she had got a little older, she signed to something called Scepter Records, 1965. It was by this music exec, um, Luther Dixon, and she recorded a single for them. And then she ended up forming a group called the Sherries, which was short lived because she had multiple disputes with the other women in the group. And then she ended up leaving and signing to James Brown's review tour, singing backup for him. Now that story was sad in itself because I didn't know that James Brown did all that to this young lady. Multiple stories came out about him later about how he was with women. He was abusive with women. I know Otis from the Temptations had later mentioned in one of his stories that they were used to James Brown, what they call flipping women, quote unquote, because they would provoke him, and they never really got the woman's side of the story because back then, a lot of women were silenced for that. So I didn't know he was really, really abusive to this young lady, beat her to a bloody pulp. Like one of her friends said they witnessed one of the last times before she left James Brown in his review, because they began to deal with each other. They started messing around, and they were together. He said he beat her too bad she had to get up out of there. Like she couldn't move. She was just a bloody mess, and that was the last time for her, and she ended up leaving. So around then, she did release one more single on James Brown's records, which was called Try Me Records at the time. She released one last single, and then she like semi-retired from music. Like I said, she's young. She's about 17 around this time. She already done been through all that, the rape, and the abuse from James Brown, who was 12 years older than her at the time. So he was able to fully take advantage of that situation. And then, she ended up enrolling in college, University of Pennsylvania. So there she kind of met Jerry Butler. He was a singer, up and coming singer at the time. And she began singing in nightclubs with him because he promised to help her with her schooling and things like that. So she began touring with him. And around 1965, they were playing at one of the clubs, and Berry Gordy, Berry Gordy was big in the back in the day. He was Motown. Everybody was trying to sign and get Berry Gordy's attention. 1965, he discovered her, and he said he would sign her. He did sign her. So he moved fast with her. She ended up making a single in 1965. She released on a label, and then she started touring with the Temptations in 1966, opening with them. She actually toured with the actual review that they had, the Motown Review, where they had all those acts like the Temptations, all of those. I that was referenced in the movie The Temptations, where they were talking about the Motown reviews, how they would get on those buses and all that stuff would take place on there. But she opened for them, and that's how she ended up meeting David Ruffin. Now, again, that's what I was saying. That's where I was first introduced to Tammy Terrell, was her name being attached to him from the movie, but it didn't go too much into that story. It just basically showed that he was very abusive to her, and some of the friends tried to step in and say, hey, you need to relax on Tammy, and he was basically telling them to mind their business. But like I said, I wasn't aware, and that's just me. I guess that was me. I wasn't aware that she was an actual recording artist on the label at that time as well, because they kind of watered that down a little bit, and I wasn't aware of that. But that was an abusive relationship. It was tumultuous from the beginning. It was very abusive, like she said, and he ended up proposing to her within a year, and she accepted. And then she found out that he was married with three children, and then had another girlfriend in Detroit. Go figure. So of course that didn't work out. And then he was so abusive to her. The last time she left him was around 1967, after he hit her upside the head with a motorcycle helmet. Now that caused a lot of injuries. Now, of course, as you know, Tammy Terrell, she died in 1970 from a malignant tumor. Now, she had been having issues with migraines and stuff since she was younger, she was stating, but they were like, a lot of that came later. It got like maybe it got excavated from just some emotional turmoil and all those abusive relationships she was in, and just being hit up in the head a lot. They just felt like that made it a lot worse. And she, in her friend's story, she basically said that she believes the emotional turmoil that she went through with David Ruffin was a lot of contributing factor in that. But after that, she went on to do her own thing with Berry Gordy's label, and she was introduced to Marvin Gaye. So Marvin Gaye and her did a couple of duets. Well, not a couple. They did a lot of duets together. They actually did a whole album together. And Marvin Gaye was really, really fond of Tammy Terrell. Like, they were really, really good friends. They performed together, and she actually took to him very well. And so they, like I said, they recorded on the label at Berry Gordy's request. And then, she ended up getting really sick because that tumor came back. And that's how they discovered it, is when she passed out on stage while her and Marvin Gaye were performing. She passed out into his arms. When they rushed her to the hospital, that's when they discovered she had a malignant tumor. Malignant means it's cancerous. So she did multiple surgeries on her brain to try to get it removed, but it kept coming back, and it was nothing else that they can do. She ended up being wheelchair bound around 1967. Around the end of 1967, she ended up getting real sick, and she was wheelchair bound by 1968. So she couldn't really perform anymore with Marvin Gaye, which he took, kind of hard. And then she ended up getting engaged to another doctor, Ernie Garrett, who was actually helping treat her in her brain cancer or tumors and stuff that she was having at the time. So by the time she was um almost on her deathbed, she had only weighed like 93 pounds. She had suffered hair loss, blindness, like she was really sick. But before she had got super, super sick, she was able to come and support Marvin Gaye in one of his performances at the Apollo one last time. And when Marvin Gaye discovered her in the audience, they said he just dropped everything and just came over to her, and they were able to sing You're All I Need to Get By, which is one of their Billboard top singles at the time. Or they had that. It wasn't at the time, but that was one of their top singles, and they sung that at the Apollo at the time. So, but then she ended up dying in 1970. The poor lady was only 24 years old, which is so sad. So she just lived this hard life all the way up until that, and then ended up dying at 24. They said Marvin Gaye took it really hard, and that What's Going On album was partly a reflection and dedication to Tammy Terrell. And there was just so much going on at Motown. They were skipping her around. She was recording, she was in the middle of the album. She did end up releasing one album under Motown, but they had Valerie Simpson kind of subbing in sometimes to the vocals, and then they would have Tammy come in when she felt good enough to come in after she was recovering from brain cancer. She actually recorded You're All I Need to Get By after her first cancer treatment surgery. So she was getting better, but then she just went back down again. It couldn't get back. So when her funeral came up, her mom barred everybody from Motown from coming except Marvin Gaye, because she truly believed Marvin Gaye was really her friend. But she said everybody knew what was going on with her daughter, all the abuse and everything like that, so they can't come to the funeral. Marvin Gaye actually gave the eulogy at her funeral, and they said it was very emotional. So yeah, this young lady had a long life, and a short life. And I would really, really like to see a movie made about her and her short life, because she had a lot going on. There was a lot of dates going on, and it would be nice to get a movie on her specifically. If it is one, I haven't seen it, I haven't heard it, or it's not promoted very well, but I would like to see one made to the, where kind of how the Temptations movie was made or the Jackson movie was made. I want to see something big come out about her, because she had a big role in a male dominated industry, and she was the voice behind a lot of stuff. Like, she had a beautiful, beautiful voice. So yeah, that's my take. Let me know what y'all think.